Hi, and welcome to another edition of Swift Motion podcast. My name is Paul Alovich. I'm Managing Director of Agile Dynamics and advisor at the Swift Motion. Today, I have a really excellent opportunity to engage in discussion. A longtime dear friend, Jeremy. Jeremy, welcome on board.
Paul, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. Good to see you again.
Tell us a bit about yourself. Introduce to our audience a bit of your background, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, sure. I'm an energy lifetimer, as you know. I've been spending all my career doing energy things. I started in the industry, working in the refining sector, doing some, high hydrocarbon kind of things before transitioning to management consultancy about 10 years ago now. It's been, a full decade. Delivering energy projects in strategy in North America, all over Europe, and in the Middle East.
Yeah, that's where all the fun is. So, I met Jeremy on we worked together on a couple of projects in the past, and what really piqued my curiosity is some of our recent conversations. But I guess a good intro into this would be if you don't mind sharing your thoughts about the current state of affairs. Like energy is all over the news. There are a lot of things happening on every level. So do you mind just giving us a bit of a context? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. No. Listen, this is always a very tricky question because things are moving so quickly. Where we were 5 years ago or 10 years ago versus where we are now, it's just completely different. Energy is just all over the place. There is a lot of new technologies that came on stream just in the last decade. There was the golden area, let's say, of renewable power that came on stream. Now it's something which is all ramping up and developing. The idea is to address energy security, reliability, and affordability globally, and also take advantage of the natural resources while decreasing and fighting climate change. Energy is going to be a huge driver of the global economy decarbonization. And what we saw in the last year is just, I think, a sharp reminder that as good as our plans are, there's always a curveball that's going to come and just make it look a lot more difficult. We saw gas prices reaching crazy ceilings in Europe. Now things have come back down. Always debates around oil production and what's going to be the needs for next year. I think still, what's now very much underlying the discussions is all about decarbonization. How are we going to decarbonize the energy sector and all the other industrial sectors using energy? So shipping, transportation, but also industrial and residential, for example. So that's what's, I think, keeping everyone's busy. Hydrogen is a big topic, hydrogen, ammonia, and that's the next wave. So it's all about, as usual, putting all of that together and see where the energy industry in itself is going to go. So that's where we are.
Awesome. Yeah. So if I can just kind of recap it, it's a lot of unknowns ahead, and I guess making some sense out of this is really a $1 billion question. So when you look at the consciousness of the buyers, people around the world are recognizing the issues that we as a global community are facing. One thing that pops up is the social responsibility, but at the same time, becoming a socially responsible citizen of the world. And clearly energy plays a significant role. And a few days back, we were discussing this tokenization of energy origination. Do you mind just giving us kind of a high level overview of your thoughts on that?
Sure. The overall idea is very simple. We're all consumers of so many different things. And when we enter a shop, we have grown very much more conscious about what we're buying. Organic, non-organic, low fat, normal fat, all the flavors and even all the various flavors of milks. Energy is something which in a way hasn't reached that tipping point. You still have to fuel your car with petrol and gas. And the electricity that comes to your home remains for you unknown as to how it was produced. You might have a sense based on the electricity company, what's the mix of production on a yearly basis. But the moment you put your kettle on, you have no clue whether it's coming from green energy or not. And I think that's where technology and Web3 and tokenization can play a very important role.
Awesome. And in your view, how far are we from this kind of reality? Because I've spent quite a bit of time working with energy companies. If you ask me, it's a very conservative, very risk adverse environment. So just on that, like kind of a mindset perspective, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The industry has always been very conservative, but the world we are living in today is also very much anchored now into the industry push, and the conservativeness has to respond and be very responsive to consumer pull and consumer preferences. So you have seen many class actions, activists coming into the energy space, and everyone is very much more aware. Now, you don't want bad press and the public to say, we don't want your products anymore.
Yeah.
So I think even though the industry is conservative, the level of awareness has raised, and consumers are going to be the ones who can now, enact and push the next frontier of things. And I believe that's what we were discussing. This entire concept of tokenization of energy will help serve that, need, that area which today just isn't solved. What is the energy you're consuming? In Europe, you can buy those, special contracts where you're guaranteed to get green energy, and they're just back-to-back contracts where you buy capacity, and that's how it's sorted out. But you can never be sure in a way. There is no
Can you give us, because a lot of our audience, I guess, does not have that visual. So can you give us an example, the stuff we discussed, like you have a Tesla electric car and you go basically and charge it, but this electricity is...
Exactly. So the concept I always use is the M&Ms.
Okay.
When you buy M&Ms, I always like the blue M&Ms.
Okay.
So if I could, I would sign a contract today that says I want the blue M&Ms. And if you could, you would probably say I would only want green electricity to come in. But when the M&Ms are produced and they're smashed into those bags, or when the electrons are being produced and sent to the grid, once they're on the grid, no one knows whether they are green or gray or black. Like, you don't know where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And they're just traveling, and then they reach your socket, and the electron that's coming from your socket, you don't know its origin, you don't know exactly. So a mix of it will be green, a part of it will be high carbon, some of it will be low carbon. And that's the same thing when you open your M&Ms, then you have the mix, because that's representative of how the overall energy is being produced. And I think so the contracts I was mentioning, which are now, when I was living in the UK, you could see that you can sign a contract with the equivalent of DWA, let's say in the Middle East, that says, I just want guaranteed 100% renewable energy coming in, which is great, but you can't trace it.
Yeah.
It's impossible. As a consumer, at a consumer level, you cannot trace that. And I think that's where what we were discussing can kick in. That's a problem I think tokenization can solve.
So basically, you're going to be getting NFTs that are going to be, from the utility perspective, much more than monkeys and goblins. And it could definitely have a massive impact on the global agenda.
Exactly. So I think the way we're describing it is to say, well, if I am an energy producer and I can guarantee or link my meters to a Web3 tokenization system where every electron or megawatt hour which is sent to the grid has its own token or kilowatt hour for that purpose, is associated with a certain token, then there is a finite amount of energy that has been produced which has low carbon characteristics attached to the token. Yeah. And that can then be exchanged, traded, traced by anyone. It's very open book. As a consumer, you can then check that you consume 10 kilowatt hour. This is when they were produced by this plant almost, and you can have a sort of guarantee of authenticity.
That's why I really like engaging you in these conversations, because this also gave me an idea. It's like one of those moments. For instance, you could also have manufacturing that is completely going to be driven by the green energy, and you could have a certificate that this iPhone has been manufactured with this type of source of energy. So that's pretty cool. 100%. So it goes actually down the supply chain. 100%.
I think, and you're absolutely right. If you think about just some of the basic commodities, but like green steel, steel, if you want to build a Tesla, that's great. But if the steel has been produced with high carbon electricity, well, you're not entirely fulfilling the purpose. And maybe that's one way of doing it. If you can certify that the steel was produced based on green energy at that time, and you can link it and trace it all the way, you can then make the entire chain a lot more transparent and accessible to the consumer in terms of choices for their everyday life. And that transparency, as we know, is always a key factor in shifting people's mind, and that creates its own market on its own. It helps, we pass the tipping points once we get transparency onto what we buy and what we don't buy. When you don't know what you don't know, and you just continue as you go. But if you are an informed consumer, you will make different choices.
That's so awesome, because it actually fits quite well into the Web3 philosophy narrative of transparency, understanding, the inclusiveness importance. So I think it's definitely a fabulous idea. You will be one of our guest speakers at the upcoming Web3 Delight Abu Dhabi. Really looking forward to hearing more. Any closing thoughts you would like to share with our audience?
No, listen, I'm very excited, looking forward to the Web3 conference. I'll get my closing thoughts for it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Jeremy, really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Paul.
Cheers.